Welcome back to the ... podcast. Before we get things started today, I just want to do a real quick thank you to everybody that's been giving me all the positive feedback about this show. And I want to say thanks to everybody for listening. I have a good time doing it. I just enjoy hearing people's stories and their perspectives on things. So that's what this serves as. So if you're enjoying it for the same reasons, sweet. Thank you. I appreciate it. Keep tuning in, and we'll have more interesting guests. But today, without further ado, we are going to get into an episode with Stephan. Stephan, I met about 3-4 months ago. He is married to my wife's, one of her best friends, and they live out in the middle of nowhere. And when I say nowhere, I mean it's like an hour to a Walmart for him. So very unique perspective, and he's also got a firsthand account of the oil business here in America. And I just think his perspective on life in general is absolutely fascinating. Super nice guy. So yeah, I give you Stephan. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Stephan, what's up, buddy? How you doing?
Doing good. How about yourself?
I can't complain. And, I probably could, but I would say nobody'd listen, but it would kind of have a captive audience with this type of environment. So,
yeah, I don't think you'd get any sympathy.
Absolutely none. Absolutely none. So, we already kind of established before we got things started that I've been ready about a little early. I got ready to do this an hour early because you're actually on mountain time, which is really weird. Explain how that works again. You guys if you go to the north, you actually change time zones?
Yeah. Someone in our government decided to rearrange the entire structure of our time zone. And instead of being about 250 miles to the east of here, they went and moved it to the Missouri River. And now, basically, if you go 1 mile north of here, we change to Central Time Zone. And usually it's east and west, but it's so messed up out here, it goes north and south where we are at.
It's so weird.
Yeah, it's confusing because a lot of people come out here and they'll come and visit, and they go off of what their phone says. Well, at our house right here, you hop on the cell phone tower in the Central Time Zone. And so, they'll wake up an hour ahead of time, and, they just, it's 5 o'clock. And it's like, no, it's 4. It's 4.
So you guys have to, you got to think about that when you're going places, right?
Yeah.
I need to be there at 5 o'clock, and you're like, oh, well, you got to compensate for that. Weird. It's super weird. So, okay, we'll get things started. I got what I call the icebreaker questions. So, favorite place you've ever been?
In the country would probably be Yellowstone. Not for the people. I don't like the traffic and all the crowded hustle of all the tourists and everything, but the mountains, when you get back in there, and you can see hundreds of miles of just mountain and wilderness that man hasn't touched. No one's touched it, or very little.
Speaking of not being touched, the next question is, do you think that aliens exist, yes or no?
Yeah. There's got to be some. I don't know if it's aliens like they portray in movies, but there's got to be some. I kind of think there's got to be something else out there than besides us.
Fair enough. Celebrity that you think you most identify with?
Chris Pratt.
Okay. I thought that was awesome. It was like you had that right off the cuff. You were ready for that one.
Yeah.
Okay. Any particular reason?
He's not afraid to stand up for his religion, and I respect that. And he's a hunter. I like,
Okay.
and he's not afraid to. He's taken heat from both of those, from Hollywood and from people with other viewpoints, and he handles it with class. And he just says to each his own, and carries on.
Sweet. So the last one is the best binge watch of your life.
I would have to say probably The Office or Parks and Rec.
I like it. Office is one of my favorites. Every time I get bored, I'm like, I'm going to rewatch that. And I've probably rewatched the entire series 3 or 4 times now.
There's a guy I work with that name is Michael Scott.
No kidding, really? You guys give him all kinds of grief about it?
I told him if I'm still around, I'm going to come in as Halloween dressed as Dwight.
That would be awesome. Okay, so give me your life story in 3 minutes, and then we'll kind of start digging into who you are and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm the youngest of 5 kids. My parents moved up here with the first oil boom in North Dakota back in the early 80s, and I was born in 85. We went to public school, did sports and everything. I didn't really care about school too much, but I got good grades. I just didn't really apply myself. Went to college, more of a trade school for electrical technology to become an electrician, and kind of bypassed the whole 4-year education system. It was more of a vocational thing, and moved down to Wyoming after college and worked in the coal mines for about 4 years. And I got tired of it and wanted to be back home and live in North Dakota and help out on the ranch. So I just quit my job and I moved back up here, and I started in the oil field, and that was about 12 years ago. And I've been doing that ever since. Okay.
So to bring everybody up to speed, you refer to, home as up here in North Dakota. Where in North Dakota do you live?
I live in southwestern North Dakota, north of Killdeer on our ranch. My parents bought a ranch. And we're in the heart of the oil field up here. I don't know if you've heard about the Bakken or the big oil boom of North Dakota, but we were here before it was cool.
Let's paint the picture of where you live, though. So you say Killdeer, and I would venture to say that most people probably don't know what that is because it's a pretty small town. I looked it up before we started, and it says like Killdeer's population is like somewhere around 1,200. Is that correct?
Yeah, and for your information, that has doubled since I graduated from high school.
Okay. So 1,200 is probably, 10-year-old information?
I would say, no, 1,200 is probably 5-year-old information. But when I graduated high school, we were only 700.
Okay. And that's on account of the oil boom, right?
Yes, but I would say Killdeer plus the surrounding areas, because we have a lot of people that live within like 10 miles of Killdeer, but out on like little 50-acre, 100-acre parcels of land. So if you probably count everyone within 10 miles of Killdeer, it's probably closer to like 2,500.
Okay. So safe to say, definitely small town living, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Just to further paint or to illustrate this, how many Walmarts do you have in your town?
We don't have a Walmart.
How many McDonald's do you have in your town?
We just got our first fast food restaurant a month ago, and it's Dairy Queen.
Ooh, you finally got the brazier, huh?
We got a DQ. We're high rollers.
Okay, so what kind of drive are you looking at for convenience in your life?
Oh, just to get into Kildare, like to run Jack to school?
Well, that or yeah, sure. Like what? Just to get into town. What's that? What kind of drive are you
To
looking
get
at
into
there?
Kildare, it's about a 30 to 35-minute drive for us.
Okay, so about 35, and that's with optimal
That's
conditions, like
with
without snow and
good
stuff, right?
conditions, no snow or blizzards or muddy roads, just good gravel roads and then good highway.
Which are pretty typical. I mean, those those weather catastrophes you just mentioned, they're pretty typical up there, right?
Yes, from November to April, there's quite a few blizzards that happen. And yeah, it's Mother Nature really is bipolar up here those months.
What about like, when I say convenience, like, like going to the grocery store or, I need to go buy a part to fix my toilet at my house or something like that. How far are those types of conveniences from you?
Well, the closest town with like a Walmart or a Menards or something like that is Dickinson, and that's an hour away.
So, I mean, that's door to door an hour?
No, that's just to get there, and then you got an hour back home, so it's 2-hour drive.
Man,
round trip.
That's crazy. Like, but you're used to it, right? So this is standard for you. You're not.
Yes, and I married my wife. She's from Missouri, and when we first started talking, she was like, "Oh, I live out in the country. We live 5 minutes away from a convenience store or the gas station." I was like, "Yeah, we live 32 miles from the nearest gas station."
So hopefully you're not like, hopefully your car's not telling you you're 20 miles to empty when you're trying to get to a gas station that's 32 miles away, right?
No, for that reason alone and for safety reasons, you never let your vehicle get below half full.
Really? It's like,
Well,
that's a survival technique.
You never know. Why risk it?
It's crazy. So, you mentioned your wife. When you live in a town that small, obviously the dating pool is going to be a little bit smaller. So you live out in that very remote location, and your wife, like you said, was from Missouri. How did you guys meet?
I bought her on eBay.
Mail order bread?
Yeah. I hopped on a dating website, CatholicMatch.com, and we met on there, and the rest is history.
You let all the ones and zeros align you guys. That's crazy. I mean, so how has she adapted to that, way of life of being up there and, being pretty disconnected and remote in a remote location like that?
It was hard at first. It was a cultural shock because she was used to, like, if she wanted McDonald's real quick or needed to run to Walmart, it was just a 5-minute drive for her, or if she just needed to run to the convenience store for something. And now you had to plan your trips out, and you couldn't just go anytime you wanted because there might be a blizzard coming. There might be, and it's not a blizzard like in Missouri where it's like, oh, we got 2 inches of snow. It's we can get 3 feet, 4 feet of snow dumped overnight on us, and you just deal with it.
Right.
So it was a big shock for her, and she was nervous. She had a couple panic attacks with it, but overall she adjusted really well, and she's appreciating a lot more of it now, and I think it's grown on her.
Right, and I think that's, I don't know. I try to put myself in that position. If I lived in that type of situation. But and then one thing that I could totally appreciate it for is that life slows down a little bit. You guys probably don't get your feathers ruffled like us city folk might, right?
We've had a lot with the oil field out here. We've had a lot more traffic and a lot more accidents on our road, if you know what I mean. And we went from, just to give you a perspective, we went from having maybe like in one day, probably like 5 vehicles that would drive by our house, like total semi trucks, light vehicles, five five vehicles would drive by to probably now on a daily average there's probably 300.
Oh wow, that's significant. So you're
And this is gravel roads. This is, I mean, we're way back in kind of like the boonies.
right. Yeah, you already established you live in a small town, but then you even live out of town, right?
Yeah. So when you have that many that much more traffic and more incidents where people are going too fast for the road conditions and they slide off, and then that you're stuck for an hour or two so they can get pulled out of the ditch or something, and it takes you that much longer to get home. It kind of gets on your nerve, but for the most part, it's pretty calm and relaxing, and you go by your own schedule out here, but it's still busy.
Right. So that brings up the next question: is what's like a typical day for you? You already said you work in the oil fields, so what's your commute like for that? What time do you start? What time do you stop? What's life like with that?
I usually I wake up for work around 4:35. I just kind of naturally wake up around that time, and I head north. I usually work around Watford City. Well, sometimes I'll work right outside of Kildare. Sometimes I got to work an hour north of here, 2 hours north. It just depends on where I'm set for the day, and I go out to that site and I troubleshoot the PLC, the instrumentation, automation, whatever they have going on. If it's a total flow, Coriolis meter, mag meter.
You're speaking Chinese. We'll get into the Chinese here in a minute, but
Yes.
so and then how long of a day do you work?
Anywhere from on average 10-hour shift usually to I've done a 36-hour hitch where I've spent the night in my car.
Wow, that's crazy. So what company do you work for?
Native Energy Solutions.
Okay, I'm guessing they're obviously that's part of the. Are they the ones actually getting the oil, or are they providing equipment to get the oil?
No, we provide a service for the oil companies to use to get the oil out of the ground or to run their pipelines, their compressor stations for the gas, their SCADA, their infrastructure, all their equipment that they use to on site for the oil or whatnot.
I actually met you for the first time face to face back in December or January. I think it was New Year's Eve, and
Yeah,
I was just blown away. I was already kind of just the way that you guys live. Being that disconnected, I can't help but think of it in kind of like an investigative way, because it's so different and foreign to what most people live. You have to admit that. And,
oh yeah.
so in that side of things, I think is already kind of fascinating. But then you started talking about the oil business, and that is in itself is a whole other beast. That a lot of people, from what I gather, they're coming from wherever all over the country to come up there to try to make the money that's coming out of the ground there. But you're from there. So what's your perspective on that? Like, being a local, is there kind of a heartbeat and a pulse to that concept with you guys that are locals up there that are from there, or is everybody just is it like a free for all?
Well, like I said, this isn't the first oil boom that they've had up here. Back in the 80s, they had one, and that actually brought my parents up here. And they're originally from Wyoming. With any oil boom, you have an influx of people. And back then, the government tried, once again, the government once they get involved with something, they'll ruin it. So they got involved and tried to raise the taxes on oil production And it basically, in a nutshell, kind of killed that little oil boom in the 80s.
Not because there was like a dry up of the supply though, right?
No, it wasn't. If oil was like, let's say $15 a barrel back in the 80s, and they put a $3 charge on it, and then to get all the equipment and to set up a site and to drill it and everything, it costs you X amount, they weren't going to see a return on their money for, X amount of years, and it just wasn't profitable to go get that oil.
Because the tax was too high?
Well, yeah, because the government, our legislator, put on a kind of up the taxes on it. Now, granted, back then, they didn't have the technology to drill as they do now. So back then, they were just drilling, imagine like a cup. You put a cup on the floor, and then you take a bunch of straws and you connect them together, and you just try to get the straws in the cup and you suck straight up,
Right. I remember you told me about this. Back in January, and I thought it was kind of fascinating because I think most people, they think, or they look at an oil field and they see, the wells out there being pumped, and they think, oh, well, it's directly under them. So how did they know to look in that one spot? But
like I said, back in the 80s, they knew there was oil down here, and they were drilling it, obviously. But they always went through this layer called they called the Bakken. And they didn't realize how massive it was, but they were like, okay, it's 30 feet thick here, and it's 60 feet thick here, it's 10 feet thick here. And they kind of just, over 25, 30 years, they kind of had a big map of it, and they were like, that's a big play up there, or like a big area that layer is covering. And as technology got better, they were able to start drilling down and then curving the pipe to put a bend in it. So they weren't only just drilling horizontally, they weren't drilling vertically, they were able to turn it and drill horizontally. And that's what opened up the Bakken to be one of like the biggest game changer oil fields not only in the country but in the world.
And when did that happen?
They first started doing the horizontal drilling, I believe, back in, I don't know for sure, I want to say in like the early 2000s.
Oh, so we're talking new technology, like. Yeah,
this is new, but then just because they could drill horizontally didn't mean it was going to produce that much, like the oil that they wanted. So now they basically were able to drill horizontally, but they still weren't getting the oil out. And so then they figured out this technique to extract the oil called fracking. And that's taking basically really, really small particles of sand and water and some other chemicals and turning it into a sludge liquid, something that chemists, I don't know, they figured out in the lab. But they basically just pump it down the hole once they're done drilling, and they fill it up like a big old water balloon. And the pores down there, the Bakken formation, is kind of like bubble wrap, if you know what I mean. Okay. It's not just a solid pool of oil. It's just little pockets of oil.
It's like diverticulitis of oil in the ground.
Yeah. And so what they're doing with that fracking is they're creating cracks in the pores or in those pockets so they can leak into each other. And once they figured that out, it was a mad race up here. It was from 2008 to 2011. It was so incredibly hectic up here because the U.S. economy was in the tanks.
Right, recovering from the recession.
Unemployment was horrible. The housing market was horrible. Everything was collapsing. People were losing money. And here's this oil boom in North Dakota. Who would have thought that? And right. None of it, we didn't have the infrastructure. We didn't have the highway system for it. We didn't have hotels, motels, pipelines. We
I
didn't have
mean,
anything built for
grocery
this.
stores alone, like you said, grocery stores alone, that's an hour-long trip. So I mean, nobody's built up and postured to take on any increased influx of people, right?
Exactly. The Walmarts in Williston and Dickinson would get their shipments in and they wouldn't even stock the shelves. They would just leave it in the aisles and it would be gone in like 2 days.
Wow. How
It
long did it take for that to kind of calm down?
it took about 3 years. It took about 3 to 4
So
years.
you get those of you that are like from there though, that had to be super frustrating, but at the same time kind of exciting maybe, right? Because you're thinking you guys were kind of on the forefront of how to make money off that, right?
Well, it was exciting because there was a lot of ways to start up a company and make good money or get good jobs, because we thought when we were growing up, like, houses up here were $80,000 for like a 2,400 square foot 3-bedroom house. Like, they were just cheap, and so you could afford a house like that on maybe a $15 to $20 an hour job, and here you are getting offered for 25, almost $30 an hour, and you're like, oh my gosh. But at the same time, we've North Dakota, not to toot our own horn, but we've been voted or been surveyed as the #1 underage drinking state in the nation. But we never had a problem with drugs.
Meaning more people drink up there than any other state underage?
Oh, and even adults. We
Okay.
and we've just really set the bar even higher as adults with the oil boom. So we got that one. We got that one in the bag. But I mean, that was the worst of it. We had a lot of underage kids drinking before this. Now we have a lot of drugs, and that was kind of hard. And it was hard to have these people coming in to our small communities and around, like, our youth of our community, and there was drugs floating around on the streets and everything, kind of.
Right, they're coming into your community and they're bringing their problems with them.
Well, yeah, and it was just like, I mean, you want to be warm and welcoming and everything, but at the same time, it's like, hey, that's not cool. And like we had drug busts in Gilder. Like, I don't remember growing up if we ever had a drug bust, and like they probably average a couple, like 3 or 4 or 5 a year. I don't know.
Is it people manufacturing drugs or just people trafficking?
There was one I know manufacturing, but they'll just do routine traffic stops and find a couple pounds of marijuana or something like that, or cocaine or meth. Meth is big up here.
So who's doing the drugs? Because don't you have to be? Are you guys subject to drug testing and stuff? Getting or working on an oil rig, because it's a dangerous environment. I would think that you guys would all have to maintain some sort of sobriety, right?
Yeah, you're supposed to, but I've been on sites where they've drug tested the workover rig and everyone on the workover rig, because the production guy or a company man went into the porta potty and smelled weed, and 2 guys got busted on their P test, and they were.
Oh, so it's just a random kind of thing, and they're taking that gamble that they could lose their job. They're not. Okay, gotcha. That's kind of, I mean, that's I think that's a lot of companies are. They can't sit there and test you every single day. So it's the threat of the random test and getting caught up with you. But that's crazy that many people are taking the chance and and using drugs that much, because in the military, I'm same with me. I have to maintain being drug free and all that kind of stuff. And you hear about it, you hear about people that that are doing something they shouldn't, but I mean, it's so few and far between. Whereas you're saying, the whole community was affected by how many people are doing drugs, which is nuts.
Yeah, it was, and don't get me wrong, Gilder is still a great community, and I have no regrets about raising my kids in this community and stuff, but it's just different from when I grew up and graduated like 15 years ago. So just, it's you got to take the good with the bad, and that's part of having a oil boom and bringing up all these workers, because like I said, we didn't have the people needed to do all the work up here. We didn't have the infrastructure. We didn't have the numbers.
So I kind of did a little research and stuff, and I saw that there's a big thing, like they call them man camps or whatever, where, guys or gals, I guess, whatever, they come up there to work, and it's they don't bring their families. They're just up there to work. Is that like contract work? And do you interact with those type of people at all?
Well, the majority of the man camps are shut down now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's still busy up here, but the big boom, like the big influx craziness, is over. And more than likely it'll never reach that level again, because all of the leases of the oil companies are tied up now. And by that I mean an oil company would go out and they would lease, say, 5,000 mineral acres.
So yeah, explain the difference between like an acre and a mineral acre, because I know like I've owned 2 houses now, and usually there's some little clause on there saying you do or you don't get to own your mineral rights, and you're just like, whatever. I live in we don't live out in the country like you guys do. So what is a mineral acre? Explain that.
Well, a mineral acre is basically the ownership of the minerals underneath the surface. So as the owner of the property, like say you come out here and you buy 10 acres. You own 10 acres and get the surface rights for that. So if they got to come across your land, like with a road, they're going to have to pay you for surface damages and work out some means of justification for them to come across your place. But now, if you're not able to secure the mineral rights to that acreage, which is all the minerals down below that, like whether it be the gas pockets down below that 10 acres, whether it's the oil, whether there's whatever constitutes by definition to be under the clause of mineral acres, then you won't be able to get them if there is oil or anything underneath there.
So do most people own their mineral rights as well, or no?
It just depends on where you go. There's some majority, I would say majority of the people own their minerals, and some of them don't. Some of them were bought. Some of them just came in and bought the land, and they did the transaction back in like the 40s or 50s, and I don't know the reasoning for it, but they were like, yeah, there's nothing out here. We don't want the mineral rights. It's an extra. Back then, yeah, it's an extra $5 an acre. You can keep that.
So then who owns it? If you didn't buy it, who owns it then?
Whoever owned it before you. They just keep records at the county the county recorder's office, and they have everything on record there.
Really? So you could buy 10 acres and build a house on it, and the guy, because you didn't say that you also wanted the mineral rights, the guy that previously owned it, they still own the mineral rights to that? They could come out
if they're the ones who last owned the mineral rights, yeah.
Wow. So then how does that work with people leasing that? You use the term that they own a lease or whatever. Do people like lease out their surface so that other people can get down to their minerals?
Well, okay. So when I was talking about leasing, so you have these oil companies coming up, and imagine you have a bingo card, okay?
Okay.
And a bingo card is 5 by 5, so there's 25 bricks, right?
Okay.
And each one of those little spots is, let's say, 1,000 acres. So an oil company, you have let's say you have 5 different oil companies that buy 5 of those blocks randomly. So none of them are in any kind of special order. They're just 5 oil companies, each bought 5 little parcels there.
Okay.
They, in their contract, they can say, we're going to buy it on a 2-year lease. We're going to buy it on a 3-year lease, meaning they're going to pay you. And back at the boom of the oil, they were paying close to $3,000. I remember hearing $3,000 to like $5,000, somewhere like that, dollars per mineral acre. That's just for the oil company to come up there and to have the right to come and drill on your land and get the oil out of there. Now they still have to pay you. They still have to pay you for the damages on the surface of your land, and then they got to give you a percentage, whatever percentage you work out with them, for the extraction of the mineral rights.
Really? So I would imagine that the locals were head over heels with this. This is a good thing, right? Because everybody gets rich off of it.
Well, unless you don't have the mineral rights.
Right, which would be kind of a tricky thing. So is that a big thing now? Everybody wants to maintain their mineral rights?
Oh yeah, if you got mineral rights up here, you're not letting them go.
Okay, because that'd be your payday for life, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can make money off of it. So
that's such a different. I mean, there's that in itself too. It's like farming, like you can have 100 head of cattle, and yeah, that's going to pay off someday. But you're dealing with a totally different, financial structure and a number and dollar figure completely up there.
The thing that really shines through about how the locals up here are and how the locals have tried to stay the same is we're such a small community, or we're from such a small community that we haven't lost that way. And by that I mean, at the beginning of this oil boom, one of our local teachers, got real bad cancer, real bad bone cancer, and he was in Mayo for like 4 to 5 months. And basically they had to do a complete hip replacement on him and give him chemo, and the chemo was so bad that they basically took him to the edge of death and then had to bring him back to life, if you know what I mean.
Was this is there any way to tie that? Does this have anything to do with oil?
Oh yeah, but
really?
Well, just hold on. I'm talking about with the community, how we held on to our, like we're a family. But anyways, so we put together a benefit dinner for him, and in one night we had a benefit auction and dinner for him, and in one night we raised over $76,000.
Dang!
In the town of Kildare,
with a tiny population, like you were saying,
with less than 1,000
right
people.
That is nuts. I mean, so everybody rallied behind him big time.
Oh, exactly. And then a little over a year ago, the high school principal, who was a year older than me, I played football and wrestled with him, his son was born with dysphyxiation of the main arteries of the heart. So basically his input valve of his heart was connected to his output, and vice versa. And so we put on another feed and everything, and big benefit auction. And I want to say we raised close to $80,000 in one night for that.
That is nuts. I mean, that's awesome. Because the other thing too is you guys don't have a local hospital that could support that. So they're displaced as well, from their home, and they're not working. And man, that's awesome though that you guys get behind them like that.
Well, and I mean, the people who have really benefited from this oil field and stuff, they haven't changed. Like all the ranchers out here, I've seen ranchers that they've had 15, 20 oil wells on their place. And they were making by, they weren't complaining, but I mean, they weren't rich or weren't driving anything fancy, living in a big house. They just had a nice house built in the 1940s that they bought on the homestead, and they fixed up a little, and they lived in there and raised their family, and they were running maybe 250 head of cows out there, and fixing their old farm machinery and everything, and they enjoyed it. They were doing good. They were happy. They were content with that. But now they got the oil money, and they still live in that same house. But by golly, they got a brand new heated shop with new tractors and new equipment. But they're the first to be out there during a snowstorm and help you. They're the first to call up or to answer the phone and be like, "Hey, I got this going on. Can you give me a hand?" Absolutely, I'll be there.
Right. So the money didn't shake their moral fiber by any means.
No, exactly.
And you guys see that with the locals, but like, what about people that aren't from there that have come up there? Have they adopted to your way of life, or do the outsiders they're obvious who they are?
Well, we've had some people that move up here and they want to, if they bring their family, they want to connect. They want to be part of like the community, if you know what I mean. Then you have the people that just come up here and they're like, "Listen, I either have no family or else I'm away from my family and I'm working 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, or 2 weeks on, a week off. And during that 2 weeks, I just want to work as many hours as I can," which is respectable. I get that. If you're going to be away from your family, you might as well make as much money as you can while you're up here and stuff. So,
exactly. I mean, what else are you going to do?
Exactly. So if you're going to just stay up here and work and then go home for a week, that's, I'm good with that. Everyone's good with that. Just kind of do your thing and stay out of trouble.
Right.
And the people who come up here with their families and stuff, they want to settle roots. They want to they don't want to work 90 to 120 hours a week. They want to work a good maybe 50 hours a week and come home and spend time with their family and go to the sporting events or mow the lawn. I don't know.
So what, you mentioned people bringing their families up and stuff. The money doesn't go as far now as it used to, right?
No.
So like that, you gave the example, would you say like a 2,400 square foot house for like 80 grand? Like what's that look like now?
Oh, probably like 200,000, 220,000.
So yeah, significant jump. So yeah, somebody might be making a fortune off of the oil, but it costs a lot of money to live up there now, right?
Yes, it does. Yeah,
yeah. That's one thing. I have some friends that were stationed at Grand Forks Air Force Base over on the east side of North Dakota, and they were talking about, oh yeah, we wanted to buy a house there. We really liked it, but houses, they were so expensive we couldn't afford it. And I was like, what? Why would a house be expensive that far off the grid where people wouldn't want to live? And they were explaining the oil money, and I was kind of just blown away by that, because that just seems so foreign, but I guess it makes sense. If there's money to be made, somebody's going to make it somewhere.
Yes. And the main thing with the houses is they were so up in Williston, Dickinson, like if you owned an apartment complex, let's say one from the 60s that it stunk and needed remodeled, but it had two bedrooms and a kitchen and a bathroom.
It met the needs.
At the peak of the oil boom, you could have rented that out for around $3,500 a month.
Like an old shoddy apartment too?
Oh yeah.
Wow. But you're saying the big part of the boom has died down, and it's not because the oil is gone. It's just the big boom part of it was building up the infrastructure.
Building up the infrastructure and tying up those leases. So if we go back to that bingo card where you have 25 spaces and you have 5 different companies that bought five random spaces on there, depending on how they wrote that lease, they had anywhere from 1 year to, let's say, 3 years to get on that spot and to drill one well into that formation to tie up those mineral rights. Once they got on that square or that parcel and they drilled one well, they own those mineral rights. They had the rights to them. They owned the rights to them. So what you had up here instead of just having 25 parcels like that, you had probably like 100,000. And all these oil companies are like, we need to run around and drill as much as we can to tie up these leases. Because if you say you paid me $2,000 an acre for my 1,000 acres, just for the mineral rights, just to lease them. So 1,000 times 2,000 is $2 million, right? So you paid me $2 million. In 2 years, if you don't come on my land and drill a hole, that contract's null and void, and I can go sell again.
Oh, okay. So they needed to buy up the land and get the equipment installed to start tapping in. Otherwise,
exactly. And now on my 1,000 acre, let's say on my 1,000 acre parcel, you could drill up to like 10 wells. But
whatever the contract, right?
Well, no, not whatever the contract. Just you could look at the formation, see if it's producing, and put 10 or 20 wells on that 1,000 acres. But when it was that busy and you had, let's say I had over 200 more parcels I had to go drill, do I want to stick on that parcel that I already have tied up, that's already mine, that I already drilled a well, or do I want to go to all these other parcels and secure them by drilling a well? So at the beginning, they wanted to go around and secure the parcels. And then after they got everything secured, they went back to them and they re-drilled them or added wells, if that makes any sense.
No, yeah, I think I'm tracking. It's just so crazy. I mean, did this attract like international business, or is these mainly just American companies?
So you know Saudi Arabia has a bunch of oil, right?
Right, absolutely.
And their oil is all vertical. A lot of it's vertical. They just drill down and they hit a big old pool of oil down there, and that's how they get their oil and stuff. And their formation over there is such a big formation that it has a global impact. But it's really black, it's really heavy oil, okay? So our oil up here, not only with the formation, like how the formation is, like you would have never guessed this amount of oil would be in that formation. And you would never, we developed the technology of horizontal drilling, and we developed the technology of fracking and everything that goes with it. And not only that, we did a lot of the infrastructure in electrical automation. A lot of companies that had ideas for blowout preventers or SCADA infrastructure, all this different aspects of the oil field, they came and tested a lot of stuff up in the Bakken. And that is having an impact not only on our nation or the national oil economy, but also on the global oil economy. What we've done and developed in the Bakken is having an impact over in Russia on what they're looking at and what they're doing. And they're looking at how this little area in North Dakota is producing so much that we're only, I want to say we're 800,000 barrels away from 800,000 or 1 million barrels away from what Texas produces in a day.
But I mean, you got to think too, like 800 or 1,000 or 800,000 barrels is like nothing, right? When you're talking about the overall volume that's coming out of there, that's minimal, right?
Well, yeah, but that's just we're talking about in a day. But to put this in perspective, let's say Texas is represented by a 12-inch by 12-inch square. And on that square, 85% of it has oil underneath it. Okay?
Okay.
So in comparison, Texas is the second largest state in the nation? So
I thought they were first, but maybe you're right.
No, Alaska is.
Oh, yeah, by landmass.
Yeah. So in comparison and by proportion, North Dakota is, I think, like an eighth of the size of Texas. Probably, I don't know, like an eighth of. We're quite a bit smaller than Texas.
But it's kind of irrelevant because you're dealing with what's underground anyway, right? Like you may not be actually getting supplies only native to North Dakota. It might be coming from surrounding states or technically underneath Canadian soil even, right?
Well, the Bakken Formation goes up to Canada, but just because it's there, it might only be like 10 feet deep and it's not worth going after.
Oh, okay.
But my point is we have 4 counties in North Dakota that are big oil producers. And it's Dunn, Williams, Montreal, and McKinsey. And those 4 counties are the top oil producers in North Dakota. We make up like probably 90% of the oil.
Okay.
And so in comparison to what Texas, the size of Texas is, compared to those 4 counties, we're probably the size of Houston.
Right. Like that.
You know what I mean?
And you're almost putting out the same numbers as the entire state, right?
Well, yeah. And we still have a lot more wells to drill and a lot more reserves under there to go in after and tap into. So we really are changing kind of, we're having a global impact up here on the oil economy.
So what's just on your prediction, what's the 10, 20, 30 year prospect of this whole situation look like?
As long as the government doesn't mess with it, I would say we got at least 20 to 30, if not 50 years up here.
And that's you're talking about the taxation that the government could put on it, right?
Or not only the taxations, but the EPA saying that, oh, this is bad, fracking's bad and everything, and we're causing contamination with stuff, or we're flaring too much and we're burning a hole in the ozone layer and global warming. And like I don't know your thoughts on global warming, but I do know we just experienced the second coldest February on record in North Dakota, I believe.
Really?
Yeah, I think we went like...
How cold was it?
Oh, we got down to negative 43 without wind chill.
Without wind chill?
Without wind chill.
Oh, my gosh.
I think we averaged... I think we went 17 days in a row without it getting above zero.
Aren't your houses and your cars, aren't they subject to like damage at that point? Those type of temperatures?
That's why you either leave them running or you plug them in. We have block heaters up here, and you plug your vehicles in to keep the oil and the engine kind of warm. There's an element in there.
Right, but what about like the plumbing and stuff in your house?
Yeah, we bury our water line to our house at about 10 feet in the ground. So
because the closer to the surface, yeah.
Yeah, so the frost line, but the frost line up here can go down to 10 feet some spots. I mean, it's not unheard of.
That's so crazy. So what are you like? I mean, I'm not saying this in a judgmental way. I'm just honest. Like, or you're happy up there, right? You like your life, and that's like you said, that's your permanent home, probably.
Yeah,
it's so crazy because there's nothing wrong with it by any means. It's like I said, it's foreign. It's totally different.
It's just how a person raised in New York City wants to live in New York City, and that's cool. If that's what you want, go for it. I like to be able to do what I do for a living and walk out my front door, and if I want to go hunting, I'm just going to grab a gun and go hunting. If I want to take a leak off my deck, I can take a leak off my deck.
That's awesome. Yeah, I kind of identify with it. I don't know that I could live like long term like that, but Lacey said she wants to come up and visit you guys, and I'm all for it. Like, let's take a whiz off the deck and go shoot stuff. So, I'll definitely be knocking on your door eventually, because I think it's fascinating, and I think it's equal too. Like, I have a good friend that I want to have on the podcast, that he was raised in Missouri, but now he's lived in Manhattan for the last 10 years. You gave that example of New York, so it's got to be, a juxtaposition kind of, mind blowing change as well. So, but yeah, that's just, you definitely have a very unique perspective on a way of life, because you guys have modern conveniences and stuff, but you're also kind of living in the past in a weird way.
Well, and that's just the oil field aspect. My dad owns a ranch and everything, and I help him out. And we run cattle. He runs 50 head. I run like 13 head, and you got to go out in the wintertime with the tractor, and you got to feed them hay. Got to make sure you got water to them, or they have access to the water tanks and everything, and they're not frozen. Here in about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we're going to start calving, and you got to go out and check the calves and the cows, make sure everything's going good, and you got to tag the calves and keep track of all that. So, not only he's retired now, thankfully, but it gets busy when you got a full-time job in the oil field, and then you got to come home and you got to do all that too on top of it.
Is there good money to be made in cattle? I was always curious about that, because you mentioned like a grand total of like 60 head between you and your dad.
It has pros and cons.
Okay.
If you're not going to be able to make it if you go out and I'm going to go buy 4,000 acres and go buy 200 head of cattle and become a rancher.
Yeah, your overhead's going to be way too big, right?
Oh yeah, it's never going to happen. But if you got a ranch that's been in your family and you buy it off your parents or inherit it and everything, and you work your way through it, and then it is feasible and it can provide you with a living. But it's hard work. It's long. You're working for yourself and everything, but a lot of the time you don't get to make your schedule. You react to your schedule, because in the summertime, you might have a really wet spring that you're not able to get your crops in, and you got to wait until June for it to dry up, and then you're doing a mad rush to get your crops in, and then all of a sudden you're in a drought in July, so you got to go cut all your hay, and you're cutting it 2 weeks early, and you had a vacation schedule. I don't know, you have something scheduled, but you got to move it, because now it's time. If you wait 2 weeks, your hay crop's going to be shot, and then your cattle will have nothing to eat for the winter.
What's the age-old saying? Make hay while the sun shines. It pretty much rings true, right?
Yeah, and then
it's crazy.
It definitely takes a special breed to do what full-time ranchers and everything do. And I'm not a full-time, I'm more of a hobby rancher, if you know what I mean.
Right. That's why I asked, like you mentioned you got like what, 10, 12, 13 cattle or something like that. So I wouldn't imagine that would be enough to sustain your family or anything like that. So that's just kind of helps supplement your income just a little bit.
Yeah, it basically you get homegrown beef to eat.
So, which saves you from having to drive to Walmart, which is like an hour away.
Well, and it's better quality.
Oh, way better quality.
So, you can't argue with that. But yeah, it takes a special breed to do what these ranchers, full-time ranchers, and that people do up here for their cattle. And did you hear about the blizzards in Nebraska?
Yeah, well, we lived there before. So we lived there from 2013 or 14 to 15. I don't know. We lived there for 2 years, and we love it there. But I've got a ton of friends there that are posting pictures and stuff like that. Like the base that I was stationed at, the water is up so high that it flooded out half the runway.
Yeah.
Which I mean, you're talking, it's like 5 miles away from the river. So that water is up that high. That is nuts. It's totally nuts.
And all these farmers out there, they can't do anything for their cattle. They're trying everything that they can. The water's coming up, the snow is deep and everything. And a lot of them, those cattle are their livelihood. That's all they know how to do. And I think they've lost 67,000 cattle down there in this blizzard.
What, are they drowning?
They're drowning and freezing to death. There was that dam broke. There's a dam that failed and it broke, and it literally washed like, I want to say a half-mile wide trench, and just the Platte River's flooding. There's a farmer that got called out to help on a rescue. There was a car stuck or something, and he went out on the bridge with his tractor, and they got the car out. And then I guess I don't know the whole story, but basically the bridge gave way, and he went in the creek with his tractor, and they found him. They found his body like a day or two later.
Right, man. I mean, that's the thing too. You're not just dealing with water; you're also dealing with the time of year. If this happened in the summer, it'd be one thing, but it's freaking freezing, and it turns to ice, or it fluctuates in and out, and I can only imagine.
Well, he was out there just trying to help someone in a bad spot, and I mean, he didn't think twice about it. He just hopped in his tractor and went and did it. And we thoughts and prayers are with his family and everything, but that's just the kind of people across the nation with these ranchers and these farmers. They'll drop everything at the drop of a hat and go help a random stranger
to do the right thing as a human being, right?
Exactly. And I'm not taking a shot at like big city living or anything, but as a country in whole, with everything that has gone on over the last, and I'm not trying to get political or moral.
If you want to, go for it, man.
But with everything that has happened over the last 8 years, with the Obama presidency and now with Trump presidency, and how divided we've become as a nation, we really need to find our moral compass.
I agree completely.
My wife just came out and laughed at me.
Are you still doing that?
Yeah, Corey and I are talking.
I completely agree with you on that. Like, it's disappointing seeing what people's agendas are. It's very self-serving, and there's times I just get disappointed in humanity, and there's nothing that feels better than seeing something positive out there, but you just don't see enough of it. When you see somebody like that farmer that you give the example of, trying to go out there and help somebody, and then it doesn't work out for him, but the intent was there. Whereas most other people out there probably wouldn't even give it the time of day to even entertain the idea to do something like that.
Exactly. And it's, if we would just recognize that more, or try to do the right thing rather than do what we want. As a country, we'd just be so far better overall. I'm not trying to get sappy or anything on this. It's just everyone forgets that we're only here for a minimal time.
Right.
And I'd rather be remembered for that. Yeah, he was a good guy. He was always helping. I'd rather be remembered for that rather than, oh yeah, he had a lot of money, but he was kind of an asshole.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of that too. I mean, I think there's a different kind of person that thinks like that as opposed to everybody else. But I think where you're at, you already kind of painted that picture that you guys are all kind of genetically downloaded like that. And maybe it's just because you guys kind of all share a little bit of a survival tactic or something like that. You gave the example of the teacher with bone cancer and everybody rallying behind them with this small community to come up with this huge amount of money that they raise because that's the right thing to do. You take care of people. And whereas, people that live in, bigger metropolitan areas, they probably have that fiber about them. It's just never put to test. I know a guy that lives in New York City, and he said it's like the craziest. It's like one of the loneliest places to live. You're like, how is that possible? There's like 8 million people. And it's because everybody just keeps to themselves. So you literally feel alone despite the fact that you're surrounded by so many people. It's just unbelievable to me.
Yeah, and you don't get to interact with them on a personal level. You might interact with someone at work and see them every day and everything, but have you ever met his wife or family or kids, or is he even married? Do what does he do on the weekends on his free time? Who cares? You just know him from work, and he works in this cubicle.
Right. I mean, we were in Tokyo back in was it October? I don't know, like 5-6 months ago. I was in Tokyo and was on a subway, and it was just shoulder to shoulder, and literally nobody knew anybody on the train. So I understand that whole, that concept of being alone. Obviously I was with my family, but I couldn't help but think like all these people ride the train together every day, but there's so many of them that they don't have the opportunity to take the time to get to know each individual because there's too many people. But there's also no interest in it. It's just very compartmentalized. Yep, I'm riding this train. I'm going to go live my life.
Yep. There's always something you got to do, and I'm sure you were probably like a green giant over there.
A little bit, yeah. Green giant. When you say green giant, do you mean like Godzilla?
Yeah.
So
take it for what it is, but I'm sure everyone looked up to you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I had to, unless I was going through a doorway, because I had to bend over to go through them, because I'm 6'6", and yeah, not everyone, but like a lot of them, like going into like restaurants and stuff like that, their clearance on a doorway is only like 6 foot tall. So, and I'm 6'6", so
really?
you gotta bend over to get into a restaurant. It was kind of foreign and weird. Well, man, I'm gonna wrap things up because I got to get going to the job for the day, and I'm sure you got to get some rest or whatever because you got Monday morning 4 a.m. or whatever it was you said you get up. But thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. I enjoyed it. It was fun.
Yeah, you definitely have a different, like I said, a different perspective on life, and I would argue that it's for the better because it sounds like you got the moral fiber to constantly try to do the right thing and be a little less self-serving than most. And most, I think a lot of people could benefit from modeling themselves after that. So everybody should go and visit Stephan in Killdeer and take a leak off of his porch and get dialed back in with, with being a person.
Yeah, I like that. I like the sounds of that. But good luck with this, and thank you for your service and everything you're doing for us over there. And hopefully you're stateside. You get back to stateside soon, and you can make a trip out here.
Absolutely. We'll shoot for like sometime next year, shortly after I get back.
All right. Sounds good, bud.
Sweet. Thanks, man.